Welcome to the second Into the Wilderness podcast. You're joined here today with myself, Daryl Pace, and my brother Byron. I'll be looking after your sound today, so I hope you enjoy. We're joined today with a bushcraft instructor and the headkeeper from Milden Estate.
I will be taking care of all the questions, and today we have quite a variety of topics to discuss. Everything from should we use the word sport in hunting to what makes a modern-day hunter. We will also be covering the big thank you note from Chris Packam and the request for him to resign from the BBC, as well as the current appointment of the Shadow Minister for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. That's not quite all, though. We will also touch on the idea of killing the last panda bear, as well as the eradication of red squirrels in the British Isles. We do hope you enjoy. This podcast is once again brought to you by the Scottish Association for Country Sports. Welcome everyone to our second Into the Wilderness podcast. Tonight we've got two more guests. One on Skype. We've got Jake Swindells, who is a gamekeeper come bushcraft instructor. And in the studio, we've got Jason Clamp, who is the headkeeper of Milden Estate. So we're going to go through the usual format, find out a little bit about our guests, and then tackle a couple of topics which may be a little bit controversial and certainly topical for the last couple of weeks. So, Jason, you're in the studio with us. Let's start with you. Just tell me a little bit about your life and how you've got to where you are today. Did you always want to become a gamekeeper, from school years, or how did you get into this?
Yeah, no, not at all. I grew up on a traditional estate, a small village, but the thing I wanted to do was join the forces, which I did when I left school, so not gamekeeping at all, no.
And what forces did you go into?
I joined the light infantry, which was that a long time ago. I joined in 1988, and I did 5 years. Like I say, from a traditional village, my father was a butcher, farmer, so it's something that I hadn't thought about, even though I'd been involved in it, most of my life growing up.
And what was it that made you leave the military and make the move? Did you go straight from that into gamekeeping?
No, I didn't. I actually left the forces and went to work for my father again. I did another couple of years working for him as a butcher, and I couldn't stand being inside in a market for 6 days a week. Hated it. So I went to college. I actually went to Bishop Burton College and did a countryside management qualification there.
What kind of stuff did that entail, and how long were you there for?
Yeah, that was a 3-year college course, and the countryside management was a wide varying qualification. Covered everything from ecology to dry stone walling to everything really. And like I said, I did that, and then I got a job on the estate where I grew up, working for the Fitzwilliam Estates in forestry actually. Started out in forestry there, and it went from there.
So from leaving college and getting that job, were you pretty much set that was the direction you wanted to take? Yeah,
definitely, countryside, or forestry or gamekeeping, or that's what I realised that I liked and I wanted to do.
And from that point onwards, just talk me through your career and the estates you've been on and the kind of roles that you've had. Because obviously you're headkeeper now, so you're kind of at the top of your game, really.
Yeah, much to my surprise, but and a lot of hard work in between. Like I say, I finishing college, I got a job with the estate that I grew up on, which was the Fitzwilliam Estates in South Yorkshire. On the forestry side of things, and got into gamekeeping through that. Working with pheasant and partridge on local shoots, and then progressed from there. I moved up onto the estate, grouse mower, and got a job there. From there, where did I go to from there? I came to Scotland, got a job on Glenogle Estate, worked there. Moved back down to Yorkshire again on another grouse mower. And then got a job, this job that I'm in now, as headkeeper of Milden Estates.
So you've obviously had quite a variety of roles as you've gone through it. You're on grouse now. Milden is primarily a grouse estate. Is did you realise early on that grouse would be your passion? I mean, how come you didn't go along the stalking route, or is it just as you landed, just the job that you ended up with?
Yeah, no, I mean, being a Yorkshireman and growing up where I grew up, I mean, you're surrounded by grouse and grouse moors, you know, so I suppose it's in you anyway because it's a normal thing to do, you know, so I mean, I knew I wanted to go down the grouse route.
And the job that you've got right now, when you went to Milden, were you head keeper straight away, or how did that come about?
Yes, I went to Milden as head keeper on the north side, yeah.
And during the time that you've been there, what have you changed? Did you sort of fit into a regime and a way of doing things that was how you wanted to do it anyway, or did you find yourself really sort of having to make your own stamp?
Yeah, no, I think you do. Initially, when you take a job on like that, you've got to fit into the things. Fit into it as things were done, but you do have an idea yourself how you want things to work. So you know it's a slow process, and you start making little changes, you know, and making it work for how you want it to work. And like I say, was still, what am I now? My third season, still making little changes and making doing things the way I want to do them, the way that I think they work.
And just give me a rundown of this year in terms of grouse, not just for you. But say Scotland as a whole, I mean, it's been quite patchy. I mean, some people seem to have had some excellent year so far, and others it's been a lot tougher.
Yeah, it's been a varied year. I mean, not just in Scotland. I mean, countrywide. Last year, I think everyone was spoilt. I mean, perfect breeding season. You know, perfect spring, summer, and everyone had grouse. But this year's been a totally different kettle of fish. The weather in particular, I think that's affected a lot of grouse moors. You know, a cold spell in the spring, just as chicks were hatching, you know, affected everyone. And you know, it's been a wet, not a really cold winter. So I mean, I think a lot of people are carrying a lot of, you know, the worm burden in grouse, you know, were fairly heavy, and I think that's what's affected a lot of the moors.
Just for those people who don't quite understand. Obviously, most people realise that the grouse is a wild bird. You mentioned worm burden. Just explain why that's a problem.
Yeah, with the grouse, what happens? It's actually the strong isle worm. It's a worm that lives primarily in the bird's gut, and they get large infestations of strong isle worm. It damages the gut. You know, and obviously it's detrimental to the health of the bird. You know, they don't produce as many young, and eventually it can kill them. You know, so we have to treat the birds for that.
In terms of grouse on Milden in particular, how do you see it evolving? Taking a look back at how grouse was sort of 40, 50 years ago, and if you can, try and think forward 40, 50 years, what do you think's going to change?
I think definitely the management of the place. I mean, 40, 50 years ago, management methods were far removed from, you know, how we manage the grouse today. I mean, the main difference is obviously the legislation and the laws. All that's changed from 40, 50 years ago, and we have to abide by those laws and legislation. So it makes the job, it's much harder to produce grouse, you know, dealing with legislation and the laws. So 40, 50 years time, I don't know. I mean, hopefully we'll still be producing grouse, you know, to shoot. But who knows? Who knows?
What do you see as the biggest threat to prevent you managing a grouse moor the way you want to manage it? We'll get on a little bit later when we start talking about the campaign through the Angus Merlin Group about exactly the benefits of what you guys do. But right now, what do you see as the biggest threat to prevent you managing a healthy moor the way that you manage it right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are threats in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously the main one, the hot topic at the minute, are the land reform. You know, that the Scottish government proposing. I mean, that's a big threat to a lot of moors. I mean, that in itself, I think if it does happen, then you'll see big changes the way the land is used, and that's the main thing, the way the land is used, and you're allowed to use the land.
Mm-hmm. And what about in terms of trapping? I mean, snaring not that long back was quite a hot topic, but you guys use it as a daily tool almost.
Yeah, we do. I mean, the snaring side of it. I mean, now excuse me, snaring is dealt with in a totally different way as it was sort of 5 years ago. I mean, the legislation in that has changed, where everyone has to be qualified and have their own number that are fastened to snares. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good because it makes the use of snares a lot more professional, and people are accountable for it. So, I mean, I don't see that a problem. The snares are working exactly the same. The only difference is that people are accountable for them, which I think, like I say, is a good thing.
No, I absolutely agree. We've gone over a little bit more away from the your sort of life story to where you've got, so we'll just swing over to Jake now. Jake, sort of same question to you. I mean, I met you a couple of years ago now, and at that point you were actually a clay instructor. But just go back in time a little bit and tell me about how you ended up there where I met you, and what it is in your life that's kind of led you down this path of everything in the world that you could choose to do.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's I've had a quite diverse path on the road up to meeting your good self, really. Originally born in Dumfries, brought up on the southwest coast of Scotland, just near Port Patrick. Very, very rural community. So, big farming community, some really nice estates around there with Logan Estate, Stair Estate as well, which I've been quite heavily involved in. Mainly through school, I had a friend who I'm still really good friends with now, whose dad is the keeper of Stair Estate, and that was really what got me interested first of all. We'd be on the bus to his house on the weekends, and I'd spend the weekend helping him and his dad sort of with the chute and feeding and, repairing pens and all kinds, and that kind of sparked an interest sort of within me. In the village itself, it's a really, really small village, Port Logan, right on the west coast. Hardly any people in the village at all. There's certainly nobody my age at the time, school age. And I just spent the time fishing, just going around the rocks, finding little bays to fish in, and make little toy weapons and spears and rock pooling, and doing all the things that kids should be out doing, really.
And should still be doing to this day.
Well, yeah. Well, to be fair, that's pretty much exactly what I am doing now. Anyway, so either regressed or not grown up, one of the two. But yeah, I mean, every person should have the opportunity to do something like that, experience something like that, because it did me a world of good, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. Just being able to walk out your front door, take your fishing rod, and I carried a Bowie knife around with me, and I've still got it to this day as well. For fishing and sharpening sticks when I needed to, and all the usual boy things. But yeah, really, that's when I was starting fires on my own. I was cooking fish on my own, when I was young, high school age. So that kind of, I was already interested in the gamekeeping. That sort of got me interested in the bushcraft side of things as well. So that's really where it started from.
And from that point, you've taken us sort of up to, I guess, the end of high school. What did you do immediately on leaving high school?
Well, my family are from south of the border, so we ended up moving back down south when I was 15. I went to college for a little while, and my dad was, very staunch, and, son, you must get a trade. So I went into vehicle accident repair. I actually worked in a garage repairing crashed cars, which I did enjoy, but I knew I wasn't in the right place, So I got qualified at repairing cars, and then there was an itch. The whole time there was an itch. And when I was old enough, I actually progressed into quite a serious career, which I was in for quite some time, best part of a decade anyway. And right the way through that career, it was in, a busy city, and it wasn't where my heart was at all. I was, I'm a country boy really, so the whole time I just wanted to be back. And we came to Crossroads a little while ago, probably maybe 6 years ago now, I had the opportunity to come back home north of the border, and I took it.
And from there, you went into gamekeeping, or how long was that before I met you?
Yeah, that was probably 4 years before we met. So I had a year out. I actually, I quite enjoyed my fishing, my sea fishing then. And I supplied some fish to aquariums around Britain and Europe as well, live fish. I was the only UK-based person supplying rod caught fish to aquariums. So, that was very, very sporadic work. Everybody wanted to fish when it came to Easter time for the summer holidays, and then, winter would be very sparse, no orders would be coming in. So, that was short-lived, but very, very enjoyable. Working and fishing, being one of the same. I really did enjoy it, but it was from then on I thought, right, well, I've left a very, very serious career, so I don't want to waste it. What I want to do, the next job I go into is the job I really want to enjoy. I don't want to go into another 9-to-5 grind. And so I thought back to what I did enjoy, and I came straight back around to gamekeeping again. So I applied for a course at Borders College, and ended up moving over to the Borders. So I lived in St. Boswell's, right near the college, and I came out of it with an HNC in gamekeeping.
And at the same time, you were instructing clay shooting?
No. That's
Is that after?
Not quite then. When during the course, it was a full-time course, and partway through the second year, I got a job on a family shoot, running the family shoot. It was a small shoot, but a good step up. And around that time, I was really putting the hours in, so I got the job at the clay shooting ground where we met, and progressed on to do some instruction. I was still keeping as well at the family shoot, so they were very, very long days, as you can imagine. And then, I worked at a couple of family shoots in the Borders. That's the time when we met, obviously. And then, it's really, really enjoyable time, I must admit. I look, even though it was only, a couple of years ago, I look back at it as some of the best times that I've had, certainly. And
you moved on a little bit since then, and you are now a bushcraft instructor. Would that be your correct title?
Well, I suppose so. That's generally what I spend my day doing now. Sadly, my last boss that I worked for on the family shoot became very ill, and he didn't know whether he would be having a shoot the next year. So I had a choice. I could either wait around to see if I had a job, or I could take an opportunity that came up back home or very, very close to where I was brought up, and where my family still are. Which was on the bushcraft side of things. Now, that was a passion of mine, so luckily I live on a small estate with a shoot, so I still have a hand in the shoot here. I live sort of 10 miles away from my bushcraft side of work, so that's a nice little commute down the west coast in every day. So it's even my holidays now tend to involve a little bit of bushcraft. A really good holiday of mine about 4 years ago, actually. Myself and 3 friends came from Sweden to Norway, and as much as we could, we lived off the land. So we're trying to trap animals. We're doing a lot of fishing every day. We're foraging for food, which is again, a big part of what I do now.
And it's really interesting to me to hear from you the public interaction that you have, because obviously you come from a background where you were a keeper and you obviously shoot. I've done some shooting with you, but the kind of people who want to come and learn bushcraft skills might be a little bit removed from that. They see Ray Mears and they see Bear Grylls, although I don't know if he really counts. It's what's incentivized a lot of people to go and kind of take this up, or at least try and find out a little bit about it. And I guess that's where you come in, because that's a service that you offer, and people can come and they can learn how to light a fire. But how does that interaction go? And do you go as far as actually killing something, whether that be a rabbit or a fish, and what is people's reaction to that who maybe haven't seen it before?
Well, first of all, yeah, you're absolutely right. Along with Ray Mears' side of things, he's certainly someone that I've read a lot about. I've certainly watched quite a lot of programs of his and had an interest in him since a very young age. Now, people see Bear Grylls has done something lately, bringing sort of a little bit more adventure to it, really. So that's kind of piqued everybody's interest. Or it started to pique interest. So they see Ray Mears and they see Bear on TV, and effectively they're sat on the sofa thinking that is cool. But what I like is that I can offer, a service whereby people come to me and they can get off the couch, they can come down to me, and I can show them, give them a demonstration how to light a friction fire with bow and drill methods, with flint and steel methods. And they have a go, and it's quite a diverse array of people that come down as well. So we'll get anything from the young groups, from scouts to families. Dads and lads are a really big thing. They've seen all this thing on TV, and they'll come down, they'll book onto the courses, and they'll really, really enjoy it. So we'll survival shelter build, we'll track animals, we'll wild food forage, we'll make friction fires. And it's something that they can really, really get hold of, that would usually be out with the reach, really. A lot of my audience come from cities, and, the closest they ever get is really watching it on TV.
Mm. I mean, Jason, just a question for you, bringing you in on this. That seems to be quite acceptable to people. They'll watch Ray Mears and he'll trap a rabbit or something, and kill it and cook it and eat it. But the idea or the general perception from the public for people who hunt as opposed to the bushcraft side of it, it's not quite as palatable. Why do you think that is? I mean, there's a definite crossover, but equally there's a definite line that people seem to draw.
Yeah, there is definitely. It's a difficult one to explain. I think. One of the main reasons why people sort of shy away from the shooting side of things is, I know we were speaking earlier about it, is the use of the word sport. I mean, I don't know whether it should be called a sport or not, or it should just be called hunting, which it is. And a lot of people, as soon as they hear sport, and then they automatically think people are doing it just for fun. And it's how they get their kicks, but it's not like that at all, and we all know it's not like that. It's more of a way of life, and it's a sustainable way to harvest the land, and that's the message we've got to get across to people.
Yeah, well, that brings me very nicely onto one of my questions. You're right. Prior to recording this podcast, we were talking about the kind of questions and stuff we were going to kind of go over, and one of them, Jake, was the use of the word sport. Now, it's pretty much ingrained in everything we do in terms of hunting now. It's a generally accepted word that we, people are going to go and enjoy some good sport. That's a common phrase that's used, and we use it ourselves as shooters. A lot of shooters use that, and in terms of the public and the way stuff is written in the media, it's often portrayed that way. But it is an interesting question as to whether the word sport should really be used in the context of what we do as hunters, if you like. I do primarily myself. I really enjoy stalking. That's kind of where I'm at. That's, if I could only do one type of hunting, it would be stalking of some description as opposed to birds. But I don't do that for sport, if you like. It's much more than that. It's much more back to the sort of grassroots of why we hunt. I do take a huge amount of enjoyment out of the management and the actual hunt. I don't take any enjoyment out of the death of an animal. And that's why I think maybe calling it a sport probably doesn't sit quite right with me. Although I perfectly accept it's a very common word, and I throw it in as well because it's generally accepted. And I don't think people using the word mean it sport as in a sort of yeehaw, fun type of way, which sport can mean. I mean, what's your kind of take on that, Jake?
I completely agree with you. It's funny you should say that, actually, because I had a conversation with my brother towards the end of last year, and it was about a different topic. It was about rock climbing, whether rock climbing was a sport. So we actually looked at what sport meant in the dictionary, and it's an activity involving physical exertion. Now that's either person against person or team against team, with some sort of skill involved. Now, if you look at the likes of hunting like you or I do, then that doesn't necessarily fit what a sport would be. I think sports generally, commonly and widely used now to describe, what we do as a whole.
Country sports.
Yeah, country sports. Yeah. Yes, it is only just a saying. It's it's a term that people use to saying, but I think it gives off the wrong impression. Country pursuit or just hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Hunting, it is hunting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think the one thing about calling it hunting, if you say hunting in the UK, most people's mind jumps to fox hunting. If you say hunting, it's fox hunting. If you say in any other... Sorry, carry on, Jack.
No. Again, fox hunting. Yeah, you say fox hunting now. Again, that's a separate issue that I don't really want to.
We'll leave that for another date, I think.
Yeah. But fox hunting. If you look at the likes of target shooting, rifle shooting, it's in the Olympics. Clay shooting. Again, the GB have got fantastic teams in both disciplines. That's sport, and that's involving firearms. That's involving shotguns. What we do, or certainly what I do, I know it's very similar to yourself, I don't class as a sport.
No, and just going back to this again brings me into very nicely into the next part. Was I wanted to kind of explore what a modern day hunter was. Now, like we've just said, hunting in terms of the context in the UK has a very different meaning because most people associate that with fox hunting. If you say you're a hunter, especially if in certain circles, that must mean you ride on top of a horse and you chase foxes around. Any other part of the world, if you say you're a hunter, it means what we really mean by that, which is, we go out in the pursuit of game for a purpose of hunting it to bring it back to your table, to put it in your freezer, to feed yourself, to feed your family, to feed somebody eventually. It doesn't matter what it is that we're shooting or culling. It all goes back into the food chain, and that's a very important point to try and get across to people, is that nothing is wasted in any of the activities we do. I mean, a modern-day hunter, Jason, I mean, it's quite a difficult one to contextualize, really, because a lot of people who shoot are not necessarily doing it for, every part of their daily life, or necessarily doing it because they need to feed themselves through hunting.
No, they don't, not at all. But I mean, hunting, it's a very broad spectrum, and I mean, you can take hunting as from lads from inner city estates that go out with ferrets on a weekend, ferreting rabbits. You can take it from that all the way up to shooting grouse. And it's all the same kind of thing. It's still the urge for people to go out and kill stuff for themselves, which they do. So it goes a long way back, and I think people will always want to do that. They always will. The things that people kill get eaten. Nothing gets wasted. So it gets eaten somewhere down the line. And I think, people have got to realise a lot of people are quite happy to go to a supermarket and buy the bacon for a Sunday morning and think nothing of it. But I mean, a lot of that bacon is, that's being produced in massive pig rearing units on the continent, shipped over here. I mean, what conditions they're raised in, who knows? People don't get that, and they don't understand that. But it's quite acceptable for them to eat a slice of bacon that's been raised in a pig unit with thousands of pigs in it. People need to, really seriously think about it and think about what they're eating. Yeah,
no, I mean, I totally agree, and I would guess, Jake, you'd be of a very similar opinion. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons my freezer is primarily filled with game, because I know that I'm not eating horse. Now, I've got no objection to eating a horse, but I want to know if I'm eating it. I mean, obviously I'm talking about the scandal, I think it was maybe a year ago now, where it turned out a lot of what we'd been eating that we all thought was beef was actually horse from some major supermarket chains. But the point really there is that how do you really know where your food is coming from and what it's been through to get to your plate? Now, the one thing I know from taking a bird off the hill or a deer off the hill is I've seen it there and it's got its fur on and it's got its feathers on. And I am very, very comfortable in that fact that I have killed this animal and it's now going into my freezer. The thing that I find quite staggering, and it's only because a lot of people don't think about it, is that if you were to show that same feathered or, just killed animal to the vast majority of people who are quite happy to rip open their plastic packet on their chicken with a little, foam insert in the bottom, they probably couldn't eat it. I mean, I'm sure you've probably had the odd tussle with people like that in the past, Jake. I know what you're like.
You paint a bad picture, Brian. Yeah, I mean, I can think of a couple of occasions just off the top of my head. On one of the bushcraft courses I ran recently, there was a lady who was asking how I got into bushcraft. So I don't necessarily advertise. I don't offer the fact that I'm a hunter to people that go there. But if they ask, I'm happy to tell them about it. And I explained that where she would probably go to the supermarket and buy packaged meat, then I would prefer to go and find it myself. And there are reasons why I prefer that. Now, during the college course, during the qualifications that you have to undertake before you have a rifle or a shotgun for starters, or for even shooting a deer, there are certain stringent things that you have to go through, and you've got to be licensed to do these things. Now you get taught how to identify the relevant signs of a deer that might not be well, a deer that shouldn't enter the food chain. Before you even think about taking any sort of shot, you're assessing the deer while it's stood. So effectively, you're happy as you can be that is the right animal to take and put into the food chain. And then obviously, once you do pull the trigger, then there's a further inspection, a very detailed inspection that goes on, after you pull the trigger as well. And I explained all this to this lady, and the deer has had a really good life. It's had very, very fresh food to eat. It's had complete and utter freedom. And that it's not being penned in. It's not being fed on all kinds of preserved food. Then it's gone into the food chain. And it's surprising actually when it's explained to people how many people come around to your way of thinking. Actually think, well, do you know what? You're right. It's had a great life. It's healthy. It's fit. And it's in the freezer, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect example of what I think is primarily the problem that we have when trying to explain or defend most of the time what we do, and that is that there simply isn't the information out there for the public. I think it was possibly on the last podcast that we did, I think it came from Nathan Little, and he was saying that you can't necessarily blame the public for having formed the opinion that they've formed from what, generally speaking, is fairly biased media, whether that be on TV or in the newspapers. Because you do need to provide that counter-argument, and I think as an industry, as hunters, historically, and not just in this country, but around the world, I think we've been fairly poor at making sure that our side of the message is out there. Because like you've just explained, you took the time to explain that to somebody, and they suddenly could see, well, hang on a second, that makes perfect logical sense. And my opinion has always been that if you eat any kind of meat, you cannot you cannot stand there and say that you disagree with hunting. I mean, what do you think about that, Jason?
Yeah, no, I agree totally. I mean, if you eat meat, I don't see how you can possibly disagree with people killing stuff to eat. How can you? I mean,
it's a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But you see, I think the trouble is people have become too far removed from it, and it's too easy for them to go to a supermarket and buy things in a packet, and half of the time it doesn't even look like or resemble meat at all. And that's the problem. People are too far removed from it.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I wasn't quite expecting a conversation to go along this line today, but that's brilliant. Brilliant that it has taken that route. Now, I'm just going to maybe go to something that's happened in the last couple of weeks, and we'll just kind of see where this goes. A couple of weeks ago, we had a call for Chris Packam, who's the BBC presenter, to basically resign, or the BBC to remove him from his role because it was felt that he was pushing, an anti-hunting agenda. I'm not quite sure where the petition came from, but I'm sure it came from a hunter or some hunting organization. And obviously that wasn't listened to. And then he came out on YouTube, I think it was last week, and said, thank you very much for all the people who had supported him. I think he got about 70,000 people sign his petition to say, keep him in the job. What I found, leaving everything else aside, what I found rather distasteful about his thank you was his call to all his 70,000 supporters who had signed the petition to join a couple of organizations. Some made perfect sense. He was asking people to join the RSPB, but then he also called for people to join the League Against Cruel Sports. And for me, I felt that was a step too far, knowing, and it's perfectly public knowledge, you can go and Google some of the things that League Against Cruel Sports have been involved in and some of the things they've been accused of over the years, in particular an area which they ran as a deer park, which was nothing short of a disaster from start to finish, with starving deer all around the periphery of that place, just simply because of densities that were too high, because they weren't managing the population. And it does make me question how somebody calling for people to support the League Against Cruel Sports can really be standing there in an organisation like the BBC presenting Springwatch, which loads of people watch, and form an unbiased opinion. I mean, Jake, what do you think about that? Did you catch that that info when it came out from him?
Yeah, I did. I did, and I mean, I'll give credit where credit's due. In the earlier days, or Chris's earlier days in TV presenting, I think he did a lot of good work. The Really Wild show springs to mind. He brought wildlife to the forefront, and he educated younger people about, the sort of necessity of looking after wildlife and introducing wildlife into people's living rooms. Unfortunately, since his sort of fame has developed and his position has developed, I know I'm not going to use the word abuse, but he's certainly in a much stronger position now, and a lot more people are willing to listen to him because of his position within the BBC. His word carries a lot of weight, and I just think he has to be very, very careful about what about what he says and what his actions are. I think he was described by The Guardian as well as Chris Packam, the hero of Springwatch, versus Countryside Alliance, who are the champions of blood sports. Now, for me, that is a very, very one-sided statement in itself. And then Chris working for the BBC, who is an independent or alleged independent company, who clearly support Chris's own thoughts on the matter, and put up with basically all of his, all of his comments, which he sails too close to the wind, really, for my liking. On one hand, he says that he doesn't disagree with some shooting, the shooting that he does disagree with, the likes of woodcock, grouse, but how one person can support some shooting and actually, be disgusted by other kinds of shooting, it's just a little bit hypocritical for me. But I can't say I'm a fan of his anymore. I've lost a lot of respect for Chris Packam over the past few years, anyway.
Jason, I mean, you watched the video as well. I mean, with particular reference to League Against Cruel Sports, I mean, how does that kind of sit with you? Obviously, I have to admit, sitting here, I mean, the three of us are fairly like-minded, although we do different things in life. So obviously, League Against Cruel Sports is not an organisation you're going to find me a member of. But I mean, how does that sit with you? I mean, calling people to join League Against Cruel Sports.
Yeah, it sits really badly. I mean, League Against Cruel Sports, I mean, we all know they disrupt a lot of legal activities, whether it be shooting or fox hunting or whatever. We know for a fact that that's happened, and a lot of the people that belong to these organisations have been prosecuted for it, and they're still being prosecuted for it. So, I mean, in a way, it's promoting an organisation, that are involved in illegal activities. So, I mean, that in itself is wrong. And, working for the BBC, which is supposed to be a non-biased organisation, I mean, it's wrong.
Mm. I mean, just to give a little bit of background on Chris and maybe get some of your comments on this. I'm not sure whether you are aware of this. I actually remember maybe a year ago or maybe 2 years ago ghostwriting something for a publication which was with regard to some new legislation that was coming out with reference to grey squirrels and the trapping of grey squirrels. I imagine are you part of that program, Jason, on Milden? Or?
No, we don't have any grey squirrels.
You don't have any? No, actually, we very nearly ran over a red squirrel running up. We had to slam on brakes to miss it. So I've seen quite a lot at Glennis, which is always great to see. But what is interesting with regard to Chris Packam, and this is widely available, you can Google it in 2 seconds if you take the time to, is that he is very much of the opinion that we should let grey squirrels wipe out our red population. And that is almost word for word what he's saying. He's basically says here, wave goodbye to the red squirrels. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I find that quite... I don't know. I find that very strange from somebody who's supposed to be a conservationist and who's supposed to, protect or be for processes that are in the best interest of our native species, and to suggest that we should simply allow an alien species, is what grey squirrels are, to wipe out our native reds, and that there's nothing we can do about it. I don't know. That doesn't sit comfortably with me, especially because part of his argument of that is that we shouldn't save one species by killing another. I mean, Jake, were you aware of that in passing in previous years? His comments on grey squirrels?
Not directly. I'm aware of his thoughts about it, but I hadn't. That's a comment that I've missed, and that's certainly not one that sits very well with me. I mean, red squirrels are an indigenous species here. Greys are brought here. In fact, they're doing really good work on Anglesey at the minute. They've virtually declared Anglesey a grey squirrel free zone, and even the reds have started coming across the Menai Bridge into the mainland, which is great news. And for me, that work should continue. Reds should be abundant here.
I mean, Jason, should we just let the greys come up the glens and wipe out the reds? Does it matter if there's not a single red left in the British Isles? Yeah,
it matters to me a lot, and I think it mattered to the vast majority of the people in Britain, I should imagine. That's a new one on me, and I didn't even know he'd quoted that at all. I mean, I don't understand his thinking of it. I mean, the science behind it or whatever, I don't know. But no, that's a strange one, and definitely not no. Like I say, I mean, the red squirrels are fantastic things. And there's no way I'd like to see them wiped out by greys. Definitely not.
Just very briefly, just give me an idea. What you don't have any in Glenelg, but what processes do? I mean, you don't have to go too far to find grey squirrels. What processes are ongoing in Angus, if you like, to counter the grey squirrel invasion? Yeah, I mean, once you get grey squirrels, they're really, really difficult to remove. They're an aggressive species. Like we all know, I mean, they outnumber and they outcompete the red squirrels. Also diseases that they spread. But like I say, once you get them in, it's very, very difficult to remove them. I mean, you can use all various methods, trapping, shooting, as much as you like, but really, really difficult to eradicate. Now, Mr. Bushcraft, have you ever eaten a grey squirrel?
Yes, I have.
And what did you? I have as well, actually. What did you think?
They're very, very fiddly to deal with, to be honest. That was one of my first thoughts. But I actually quite enjoyed it. They're a very, very clean meat. They eat very clean foods. There's very little contamination in what they eat. So again, I'm all for grazing the food chain.
Well, grazing the food chain. I like that. Maybe we should start a campaign. Well, I ate mine back in my university days, so things were a bit tight. That's going to be my excuse. Just as a final note on Mr. Packam, this is just a totally out there point, and I'm interested to see what both of your take is going to be on this. Is another thing that he is quite famous for saying, and I don't know, I'm almost siding with him on this, is that he basically suggested, I think it was back in the early 2000s, that we should let the last giant panda die out, and we should use the funding, because a vast amount of funding goes into protecting a species that doesn't want to breed and only eats one type of bamboo. And we should use that funding to protect other species that maybe have a chance of proliferation. Species, I suppose, like the rhino, which need a lot of money spent on them right now to protect them from poaching. I mean, I don't know, Jason. Should we let the panda die out, or should we auction off pandas, or what should we do?
No, definitely not. I mean, why should you let any species die out? And as a hunter myself, you don't want to see the last of any species disappear. You don't. And the way you talked about earlier, the management of these estates for shooting. It benefits so many different animals. That we want to see still living, everything. And how I can say, just let the species die out, I will never know. I mean, that's another strange one from him as well.
I mean, I actually thought about this long and hard when I first heard about it, and I can kind of see the point, and I know most people will not agree with this, but I can kind of see the point if there is so much money being spent, and I don't have the numbers, but if there is, but I know that it is a colossal amount of money being spent on saving this one species. Is that really fair? Is that really fair on other species that are not big and fluffy and cuddly and everybody can kind of, go and see in a zoo? I mean, a great example that I heard of was there was a subspecies of rock rabbit, which is a type of rabbit that you find in Africa. And this subspecies was found somewhere up in Namibia. And it's under threat of becoming extinct. It's eaten quite a lot by the native tribes up there, and it's on the brink now. It's almost at the point of no return. But Jason, have you heard about this little rock rabbit that's about to become extinct?
No, I've never heard of that.
Jake, have you heard about this little rock rabbit?
No, I have not, unfortunately.
No, okay, well, of course you haven't, because people don't or can't relate to it like they can relate to a panda bear. And from that point of view, I can kind of see, is it fair to spend all this money just because people can relate to this one species, because it's there and it's majestic to look at, whereas we shouldn't spend equal amount of time and effort and funding on these little species that nobody even knows about. So I don't know. Maybe I can kind of see his point on that one, but equally, I don't want to see species wiped off the face of the earth and not put any effort into saving them. But maybe it is the case that there should be a fairer allocation of funding. Maybe that's more the point. Jake?
If I can just detract you from the funding side of things, first of all. The one thing that's, I certainly don't have an opinion at the minute, because I don't have enough information on it. But one thing does strike me is that Chris Packam is obviously, in one sense, wanting nature to take its course and not to be involved where reds and grey squirrels are involved. But when it comes to pandas, he seems to take the higher power when it suits him. Has he been elevated to some sort of higher power when it comes to certain species but not others? Is he willing to make a decision on, let the panda die, but I'm not getting involved in the squirrels? There's got to be some consistency, really.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is probably a debate that would run and run, but I thought I'd just chuck the panda in there because it's an interesting one, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people with a lot of opinions on that. But I think allocation of funding, I don't want to see the pandas die out. But it does raise the point that people care about things that they feel they can kind of relate to. And we talked about this in the last podcast, but everyone was up in arms about Cecil the lion because people can relate to a lion that, everybody's seen The Lion King. But nobody cares about some little obscure grasshopper somewhere in the Amazon that's about to become extinct. But I mean, that could run and run. I think we'll pick that up with some other people at another time. Just to take this on, this is all very serious now. Going from Chris Packam onto the next very topical aspect, which is the recent appointment of the shadow. Let me get this right now. It is the Shadow Minister for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which is Kerry McCarthy, MP for Bristol East. Now, it's widely been publicised in the last 2 weeks that she is a vegan, which is fine, but she's also the Vice President of League Against Cruel Sports, which we've already covered to some extent tonight. It seems to me a really odd appointment, and I just have a quote here which I've pulled from a reputable newspaper from the Telegraph here, and you probably saw this in the papers this week. It's just to pull a small part of her quote. She said, "I really believe that meat should be treated the same as tobacco," and basically what she was saying with that was that we should discourage people from eating meat. Jason, I mean, the appointment, her thoughts, her membership, her stance. I mean, where does that sit in terms of, where we are in the UK as people, as communities, and farming?
Yeah, just read me the name. What's her appointment title again?
Shadow Minister for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Well, there you go. I mean, that explains it all. How on earth can you have someone with that mindset dealing with rural affairs, and those issues? I mean, I don't know. I just cannot work that one out. I mean, what they're thinking by appointing her as that. I mean, you can imagine farmers rolling about on their backs, laughing at that appointment. That's not going to do the Labour Party any good at all, is it? By appointing, someone like that. And like I say, I find it really difficult to understand, where they're coming from with that one.
Jake, I mean, I think we're probably all going to be on the same page here. But what's your take from it?
I'm just wondering whether Jeremy Corbyn's done his homework. I mean, obviously he's new into office. Has he looked at the background and thought that's a good idea? If he has, then that's very, very worrying. It just, how much faith do you put into a leader who appoints somebody who's against farming? I watched a 15-minute debate by Miss McCarthy today. And it was almost laughable, to be quite honest. It was 15 minutes. Instead of, her constituents voted her Bristol constituents voted her in as their representative, and instead of representing them in the House of Commons, her only chance to speak was a speech about how everybody should become vegan. Now, how she can't even represent her own constituents, let alone the people who she's now been appointed to represent, whose views she doesn't agree with, which is farming and rural affairs. So, she hasn't done a job to begin with, so I'm going to presume that she's not going to be able to do the job she's been appointed to do now.
No, that's interesting. My brother and I, we've been up the Glen all day, so we must have missed that. We've not had any phone reception or certainly seen any news today. So, but I mean, it kind of, it doesn't really surprise me, and I think that farming is such a backbone for so many rural communities that we are all part of. I think any move to damage that in any way, and that's really the only way that I can describe her points of view, because I don't see how what she has come across with right now can be seen as any other way than damaging to those farming communities. And I mean, being vice president of the League Against Cruel Sports, I can only imagine what the moves would be that she would like to push in terms of, what the activities that the three of us enjoy and are part of as part of our livelihoods. I mean, no, I wouldn't even want to bring up the question of hunting and grouse shooting and stalking. I can imagine what those answers would be. And finally, we come to our last topic of the night. I know time is ticking on a little bit. The issue of hunting magazines being put on the top shelf. Now, I remember this came up in discussion about 2 years ago. It was part of a campaign by Animal Aid, and there was actually a picture of me with, of all things, a kudu cow that I'd shot in Africa a few years back, in this animal aid brochure that was trying to convince government and to change regulation to make sure that hunting magazines were on the top shelf. I mean, Jake, what is your take on this? I mean, what possible reason could there be for it? Is there a justification to put hunting magazines and on the top shelf? And what would be the damage of that? I mean, and consequences?
Personally, I don't think there would be any damage or consequence about having, field sports or country pursuit magazines or whatever you want to call them, shooting magazines in supermarkets. My preferred supermarket has actually stopped stocking any type of shooting magazine now. They're quite happy to stock angling magazines, and I haven't yet raised it with them, but I actually plan to. I think it's a question of education. I think the gun law comes into it a lot, but obviously the use of firearms with non-licensed people far outweighs the use of any firearms with malice for licensed users. But I think it's just a matter of education and educating people that removing these hunting magazines or shooting magazines from the shelf, it's not going to make a scrap of difference. If one is seen or if they're trying to be reintroduced, it's going to have a much bigger impact because they haven't been seen for a while. It needs to be in the public eye, and there needs to be more education about it, and they need to leave. It's got to be a blanket ban, which you won't be able to do. It's got to be, if you're going to take shooting magazines off, take angling magazines off, and that's just going to have a big knock-on effect, and then you won't be able to read anything, you won't be able to look at anything, you won't be able to look anything up on the internet. But it's getting silly.
You're saying where do you draw the line?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jason, did you hear about that story when it came out a couple of years ago?
I did, yeah. I heard about it, and I think pretty much the same. Why should it? People need to know these things. Everybody's got a freedom of choice to read what they like. And it's not offensive. And it's not in people's faces. It's your choice. If you want to buy one of those magazines and read it, then that's fine. The covers to these things don't have graphic images on them. So I don't see the problem at all.
And what about an age limit was the other thing that was brought up recently.
Yeah, whether there is an age limit or not, why should there be an age limit on it? It doesn't make any difference. Okay, there are pictures of guns and knives in there, but there are already age limits for buying and possessing all those kinds of things anyway, so that wouldn't make any difference, I don't think, anyway.
Just kind of following on from this, and I just want to touch on this before we wrap up tonight. Talking about education and making sure that the public are informed more accurately from your side of view, from our point of view of what's going on in the countryside. Jason, you've been involved in a very, very active campaign as part of the Angus Glen's Merlin Group. Can you just, just briefly give a rundown of what you're doing and why you're doing it and the success that you've had so far?
Yeah, the Angus Glen's Merlin Group is just one group of a national, the national groups now, just one part of the country. The Angus Glen's Merlin Group is designed to educate people and let people out there know exactly what we are doing, and the amount of time and effort that not just gamekeepers but gamekeepers' families put into the job we do, and the communities that are involved within shooting estates. People don't realise the size of the thing. They don't realise how shooting estates affect the local communities. From schools, to butchers, to garages, so we're trying to get this message across to people through the Angus Glen's Merlin Group. We've had a lot of success with the group so far. We've down in Edinburgh, was it last Tuesday? We showed a film to the media and the Scottish Government, which we made. The film explaining sort of a year in the life of the gamekeeper, and the families and everything that's involved in it. So yeah, getting a good lot of success with it.
Jake, have you caught this campaign? Have you seen bits and pieces on social media? And
Well, to be honest, I've caught just a few bits and pieces of it. I'm not completely versed in it, just with having a lot of other commitments over here at the minute. But yeah, I'm aware of some aspects of it.
And in terms of the effort to get the message out there, I mean, obviously it's an important thing to do. Do you think that this is it a little bit too late, too little, too late, or what's your kind of view? I mean, I think it's a marvelous campaign, and I'm really pleased to see it being run. It's so good that this kind of information is now freely available, and the point of view from the keepers and the view out of the glens and all the local communities and the local businesses that are involved is out there. But a little part of me feels like it should have been done a little while ago, because it's a shame that this information hasn't been available.
I think the giant panda would have a better answer on that than I would. But absolutely right. Again, I keep coming back to education, but having completed the gamekeeper's course, fairly recently, 3 or 4 years ago, it gets drummed into you. We go out visiting communities, and you can see the benefit in those communities, in the shops and the butchers, like Jason says. And it's the farm workers, it's the gamekeepers, it's the knock-on effect, it's the game dealers, it's the butchers, it's the post office. It's the economy that surrounds the whole group. You're getting people paying money to come in. They're plowing money into the economy. They're staying in local accommodation, and it's a massive thing. So no, it's not too little, too late. I think we need to do the right thing, and we need to do it now.
I think that is a perfect way to finish up this podcast. Thank you very much, gents, for joining us this evening. I know it's been a late one, but I really appreciate you both coming on. And thank you very much for your input and comments. I think it's been a good chat tonight.
No, thank you, Byron.
Thank you. Thanks.
Speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. It has been a very interesting show. Don't forget, this podcast is now available on iTunes to download. It will now be available once every 2 weeks, and it will be on other platforms such as YouTube and SoundCloud. Now, I don't know about everyone else, but I will be watching the rugby this weekend, so I wish Scotland a very, very good game against South Africa. I will actually be there in person, so good luck to Scotland. And what do you think, Byron? Who's going to win?
Well, I have to side with Scotland, don't I? I really, really hope that they don't disappoint, but they've been playing well so far. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening from me. As we said at the start, this podcast has kindly been brought to you by the Scottish Association for Country Sports, without whom we wouldn't be able to bring you this podcast. So thank you very much to them for supporting us. Until next time, stay safe.